Hello guys, welcome back to John HD Gaming, and in this episode I'm going to showcase my Norwegian deck. This is a pure Norwegian deck where I do not select any bonuses, and as a result I can get access to all of the available units instead of being restricted to some. The first thing you should note is that you get a lot of activation points, and this means that in your game you should bring in quantity to overwhelm your opponent. And from as far as I can tell, the Norwegian deck does not contain obviously superior units that can outrange or overwhelm your enemy. So you should definitely bring in numbers. As usual, I bring in 2 supply vehicles and I bring in a armored CV. I brought in the cheaper armored CV instead of the tank armored CV because I find that I have no use for weapons on my CV. I like the armor but not the weapons because I'm never going to push the front lines using my CV. Alright, so next I brought in some infantry. I find that these stormers are pretty good. What I like best is their Carl good stuff, the sort of AGM kind of weapons that they have. The accuracy is pretty high, having 12 accuracy, AP power of 18, which is amazing. I brought in some AA squads. These RBS 70 have decent range against the helicopters and aeroplanes. And these other guys, I'm not sure to pronounce the name, but I guess you get the idea. They have relatively good accuracy, but it is slightly inferior to the Stormers, as you can tell. But these guys are very good multi-purpose guys, I would think. As usual, I brought in my APCs, land-based APCs and not the helicopter based because I do not want to get my carriers shot down. And nowadays a lot of players bring in a lot of AA, so land based carriers are more recommended, I would say. Now these carriers that I brought in, they are very good sort of anti-infantry kind of vehicles. They are not meant to go against large or heavy vehicles, so do not push them in the front line. Use them mainly to defend your infantry that you bring in. Now for the supports, I brought in some AA vehicles of my own, and these AAs, as you may have guessed, are decent but they are not amazing. Their range is not fantastic. Their range is sort of inferior to those of the US or the Soviets, but I like their accuracy and I like their HE power. So what I would suggest that you do is to bring in a fair bit of them. I have brought in a more experienced unit as well as a less experienced one to get some sort of middle ground. But you could either go for the both as more experienced or both as less experienced, depending on your playstyle and how you deploy them around. Now for the tanks, from what I can tell, the Norwegian tanks are inexpensive. In fact, rather cheap. However, just a quick look will tell you that they have very little armor, especially very little front armor. And the front armor of, let's say, 6 for example, or 7, perhaps will get destroyed in one hit by a very good AGM squad or AGM vehicle. So I guess you should bring in more of these leopards, 1A, 1 and O. I'm not sure how that is supposed to be pronounced, but I guess you get the idea. Bring in the more expensive Norwegian tanks. These guys are the main front line, I would say. So I brought in as much as I can. For the other cheaper vehicles that I bring in, I brought them in mainly as sacrificial units. These guys are meant to be pushed and thrown away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get the enemy's attention to fire on these guys, while my more expensive tanks deal the main bulk of the damage. So that is at least my strategy. I brought in some recon, some land-based recon that is pretty decent, and I brought in a fair bit of infantry recon. These infantry recon are pretty good, I must say. The Marine Jaeger has a range of 1000 meters and a high accuracy of 18. If I'm not wrong, this is a sniper rifle kind of weapon. So that is pretty good. So I'm gonna bring in a lot of recon to get myself a lot of vision. because my units are not superior to most of my opponents. So having a proper vision, having a proper strategy will help me win. So I'm going to bring in some vehicles. These guys are more of the ADGM kind of squads. They are not that cheap, but they are essential. As I've spoken, these tanks are not able to hold your front line for a long time. They are mainly to capture the attention of your opponent. The main bulk of the damage dealt are these more expensive Leopard tanks, as well as your Conquer squads. So in order to keep these alive, you gotta sacrifice the cheaper tanks over here, which I'm sure can bring a lot of them. Right? There are no helicopters for the Norwegian deck, so that's one thing less to worry, I would say. Now for the planes are not fantastic as much as I can tell. There are no obvious candidates that we can pick to specifically target enemy aircraft. So what I'll suggest is bring in a larger number of them, such as the Starfighters. They have a range of over 3,000 meters. It is far inferior to those of the Soviets. The MiG-31s, for example, with a range of 11,900 meters. So you will get outrange. So bring a few of them to the battlefield and try and swarm your Soviet opponents so that you can take down the MiGs. The Fighting Falcons are decent, but I think they are better for the ground attack targets because they have 1000 kg rounds, and that is pretty awesome against ground targets. High HE power 20 and pretty good accuracy. Now the Freedom Fighters have rockets. The rockets are sort of approximately the same range of a helicopter. In fact, I would find that the Freedom Fighter is more of like a helicopter. What I mean to say is that I will use a Freedom Fighter in the way that I'll use a helicopter. Just that the Freedom Fighter might be a little faster to get to the location that I want it to get to. Alright, so bring in more of these planes. I would suggest bring in a fair bit of the Fighting Falcon because they are multi-purpose. The Starfighter is also pretty much multi-purpose, just that it's a little bit cheaper than the Fighting Falcon. However, the rounds is less in weight, 450 kg versus the 1000 kg. So if you want to go against the ground targets, the Fighting Falcon would be a better choice. And once again, I would like to highlight that you gotta bring in a large number because you cannot sort of overwhelm your opponent by having greater firepower because there is very little firepower in the Norwegian deck. Try and get good positioning with your infantry as well as your ADGM vehicles while baiting your enemy with the cheaper tanks, and you should be able to have an easy win as long as you can have a good trade in terms of units and points. So just to let you guys take a look at what I have, and you might want to build your deck this way. And once again, quantity over quality. That's all from me, signing off.